Hello and welcome to another 31 Days of Horror 2015 Toronto After Dark edition. We are out here in the wilderness because, well, I'm going to talk to you about a film called The Interior. And it essentially takes place out in the wilderness. So I figured where else to better talk about it than the element that it comes from. It's a Canadian film. It's actually one of the producers is one of the programmers at Toronto After Dark, so it's not surprising that it showed up in the festival lineup. It's directed by, it's writer-director actually by Trevor Juras, who, this is essentially, he's a first-time feature film director. He had done shorts before. I believe one of the shorts had played at the Toronto After Dark Film Festival in the past. And that's where I guess Peter, the producer, met up with him because he programmed his short. It stars a Ryan Austin in his first role, essentially. And honestly, I can say that considering this is his first role, he did quite well. He really fit the part. He really played things quite well. Yeah, the film itself is a little bit of a genre bender, if you will. It's not what you would normally see at Toronto After Dark. It's actually something you might see more along the lines at, say, TIFF, the Toronto International Film Festival, but done a little bit better. The film essentially is about a young guy, you know, probably in his 20s, who eventually finds out that he's sick. He's got some kind of an illness. I'm guessing it's probably terminal, but they don't really go into it. So he decides to leave his job and his girlfriend and the city and take a trip out into the wilderness that is BC, British Columbia, aka the Interior. And of course, you know, along with that, he brings his fears, his anxieties, his all that pent up idea and thought that he has now that he's, you know, he was already a little bit ho-hum about where he worked. So upon finding out that, you know, things for him physically weren't so well, yeah, he didn't take the news so well. Now, this is like I said, a genre bender, in the sense that it's kind of a comedy, especially at the beginning. It's very comedy, but it's also like art housey. There are things going on in there that aren't conventional. You wouldn't see in a normal comedy type thing. And it's also kind of a horror. It's almost doesn't make my 31 Days of Horror, but it is enough of a horror film in the second half of the film, once he ends off into the wilderness, that it fits, just barely. And so, like I said, it's comedy, and I did get a few chuckles out of this one. It is not something that I expected, but at the same time, the director says that he always puts a little sense of sarcasm in all his work. So I even ended up laughing at parts where I was probably supposed to be maybe scared or a little out of my element. And he actually enjoyed that, because he did say that there are moments in the film where, you know, yes, they are supposed to be a little spooky and odd and eerie, but at the same time, they're also kind of absurd. And that's the thing with this film. Like I said, it's art housey. It's got a lot of weird stuff going on, and I don't necessarily. I didn't think the film as a whole really worked for me. It had some great ideas, had some great concepts. The beginning of the film felt really low-key, low-budget. It didn't work for me in terms of the look of it, which is odd, considering the second half of the film in the forest looked amazing. Though they were shot forest first and then office second, I believe. But the same, you know, DP worked on both of them. Different cameras, different lighting setups. But why I say the second half was I mean, once he's in the forest, it's gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous, and it's just one of those things where, you know, like, the camera picked up the beautifulness of the forest, and then at night, like, I mean, so much of this is at night, and it's essentially lit by a lantern and a flashlight. There's no other lighting. It's single source lighting, and it looked really, really good, like amazing. Yeah, honestly, I think more people should take a cue from this, because it looked so good, so good. Normally you can't get this type of a beautiful looking, especially at night, scenery and scenes from such a low budget film. So I was quite impressed with that. The film's music was one of the things I had a problem with. They tried, you know, went with some classical scores and stuff like that. I just didn't feel it fit with the film. I didn't think it fit with the moments, and that's part of the surrealness of the film. Obviously, you know, the director says, you know, his influences people like David Lynch and Werner Herzog and Lars von Trier and the Coen brothers, and you can totally see this. I mean, he had just come back from the Werner Herzog school for film. And I think this is very much a sort of a Lars von Trier meets Herzog type film. And so if you're into those directors and all that kind of stuff, then this is probably your type of film. Even if it doesn't quite necessarily knock it out of the park in terms of that genre, I still think you're going to enjoy it. In terms of the horror elements, it really is, you know, like I said, it gets to the second part of the film. The beginning of it's not horror elements. It's mostly comedy and situational. So almost they liken it to The Office, but it's a little bit too surreal for The Office in my mind. But yeah, I guess if you want to go for a comedy set place in The Office, then The Office is what most people think of. But the second portion of it's him alone in the forest, secluded, and it's one of those things where, you know, when you're alone in the forest, you might get a little scared, right? Especially at night, because there are a lot of sounds in the forest. And for people, a lot of people are scared of the forest. They're scared of being alone. They're scared of the dark. This has all those elements wrapped in there. It's got a little bit of a Blair Witchy thing going on because of that. I'm trying to think, there was another film in the forest. What was that Bobcat Goldthwait Bigfoot movie? Similar to that as well in terms of feel. But yeah, and then it starts getting really weird, right? You know, first items start going missing, noises that you shouldn't hear in the forest start getting heard, but there's never anything there. And then, you know, you start seeing somebody, and then they're not there when they should be there, and, you know, things just started getting a little weird. And yeah, so it's just one of those things where if those portions of it, and you start getting really scared because of the forest area, then you can really buy into those weird things that are going on, and it'll probably be scarier for you. For me, like I said, I ended up laughing a little bit more come the end of that end portion where it was supposed to be spooky, but at the same time, I was too wrapped up in the scenery. I was loving it. It made me want to go out there and camp. But one of the aspects there that I found odd was this guy, you know, he's a city guy. He's in the city. They even made a comment, what do you know about the wilderness? Why would you have this thing? And yet the guy who's out there in the forest clearly has an idea of what he's going about. He's dressed properly, he has the right gear. He doesn't overpack, which is normally something that somebody from the city going camping does. He carries a small stove instead of a big stove. He knows how to, you know, set up a tent, pack up quickly and set up quickly, how to, you know, what kind of food to bring, how to, you know, put stuff up into a tree so that animals don't get at it, that kind of stuff. which most people wouldn't be able to do. And this is what I was thinking. I was thinking because of the comedic aspects at the beginning of the film that's what we were kind of going to get for a little bit through into this forest, was sort of him bumbling around and sort of trying to figure out how to do things, right? And maybe see a bear or a raccoon or an animal or something steal his stuff. But no, we jumped right into, he seemed to be like a woodsman right off the bat, dressed properly, setting up properly, doing everything properly, and then weird stuff just seems to happen to him. And that's the spookiness of the forest. I wouldn't recommend this film. I don't think it doesn't have a wide enough audience to recommend it. I didn't particularly enjoy it. Like I said, I like the idea, I like the concepts behind it, I like what they did in certain aspects of it, and I think they did certain things really, really well. But ultimately, it was too much of a mishmash, and a lot of things just didn't fit together as well as I would have hoped. Good, interesting concept or concepts that have been put together and didn't quite jive for me. But yeah, so I mean, if you're into Lars von Trier, if you're into Werner Herzog, if you're into the weird, then check it out. It is definitely something that you might be interested in. You may not necessarily like it, but sometimes these kind of films are hit and miss when you're a fan of that kind of thing. But definitely still worth checking out. But yeah, in the meantime, that's the end of this episode of 31 Days of Horror for the Toronto After Dark Film Festival release of The Interior. Until next video, take care. Have a good one.